Hi there. Today we are looking at a MasterGMAT critical reasoning question, and I think it should be obvious what kind of question this is, but we're going to go into the explanations after I give you guys a chance to try it out. So obviously for those of you who want to give it a go, pause the recording, unpause it when you're done, and then we'll discuss the question together. So go ahead and pause the recording now. Okay, welcome back. Now, obviously this is what we call a complete the argument question, since you see the blank over here. And there is a certain way to attack this, of course. Now, complete the argument questions, we're going to start with an easier one today, as it's the first one of its kind that we're looking at together. And then, throughout these videos and in the near future, you'll see hard ones. Now, the first thing you need to do is obviously break down the argument into premises, conclusions, assumptions, and so forth. And then you need to identify the question type as one of the question types that you might have. So really, this is a kind of question that is flipped into something you are already familiar with. If you have studied with us or you study with us, you already know that we have several different kinds of question types for the critical reasoning, each one with its own obvious technique and traps to look out for. And of course, once you identify the question type, you proceed as you would with that particular question type. So let's get to it. Okay, so the first thing we see is that the first sentence is actually a premise, factual, right? Newspapers represent one of the major forms of media communication, fine. Second sentence, also a premise. Like television and radio shows, a newspaper's success is measured by the attention it receives from the public. Okay, now the first part of the third sentence is actually a conclusion. How do we know this? Take a look at the word therefore over here. So, the information in newspapers should never be trusted, since, now we have to be careful over here. What does since indicate? Well, since the missing part follows the reason conjunction since, it is a premise. And it's a premise which supports a conclusion because of that word since. So it's basically a conclusion strengthening question. We have to flip this into a conclusion strengthening question. We're looking for a conclusion which obviously, a premise which obviously strengthens the actual conclusion given over here. Something that agrees with the idea that, or the conclusion that newspapers should never be trusted. So let's go through the answer choices. A. Almost all newspapers today own corresponding internet sites that publish their articles free of charge. Does this strengthen our conclusion that newspapers should never be trusted? Not really. It neither strengthens nor weakens the conclusion. Now, you have to be careful with conclusion strengthening questioning. You have to be careful that, A, you're not picking an answer that weakens the actual conclusion. You also have to be careful of answer choices that do nothing, that are completely irrelevant, or that present something other than a premise in this case. So here, the fact that all newspapers today own corresponding internet sites or publish articles free of charge does nothing to the argument. We can't know that they can't be trusted just because of an internet site that they might have, or because the information is free. There's no connection whatsoever made in the argument. So we can get rid of that. B. It is written with the sole purpose of creating an emotional response in the reader. Well, in this case, obviously, if we know that there's some kind of ulterior motive to writing an article, then yes, we can obviously question the honesty of a newspaper, right? If they're trying to get an emotional response and they might lie by doing so, we obviously cannot trust it. So we keep this answer choice here for now. C. It is gathered by a group of journalists, so statistically at least one must be dishonest. Well, let's say it's 1 out of 1,000 or 1 out of 100,000 journalists who's dishonest. Does that make newspapers in general untrustworthy? Not really. Now, by the way, if you're a little confused by it, you can click on that answer choice, right? And you get a nice little explanation that breaks down the argument properly. And if you're still confused, take a look. you can actually go over the lesson, right, of conclusion strengthening questions and complete the argument format. Pretty cool. So these are lessons that our students have already learned. You click on it and it gives you exactly the little summary that you need, right? You can go back like that, and of course you get to try again, another cool feature. Now, let's go to the next answer choice. D, most TV shows' income is generated through advertising. Do TV shows' income generation have anything to do with the fact that newspaper can or cannot be trusted? Absolutely not. This is completely irrelevant to the argument. And E, editors are trained and hired to identify biased views and weakly established arguments. Now think about this for a second. If editors are trained to identify the biased views and weakly established arguments, what this answer choice actually does is it weakens the conclusion that newspapers should never be trusted, right? Because it's telling us, well, newspapers are actually trustworthy, right? So we can get rid of that, and of course our best answer is B. Click on that, and you get a nice little explanation as to why it's correct. And that's it. That's how we get through a complete the argument question in the critical reasoning. Not too bad, right? Okay, so until then, happy studying and see you.